And then they also have a part that comes down like this that we call an axon, and that is sort of like roots, and that's where a cell sends out information to communicate to other cells. So this would be that insulated part that goes from one area of the brain to another. These branches also have, you can kind of think about them like leaves. We call them spines. So neurons have these spines, especially excitatory neurons that are sending information that increases activity in the brain. They have a lot of these things called spines, which is where another cell can communicate and form a little message connection to send a signal between different parts of the brain. And then there are lots of different types of neurons, and they will kind of form connections with one another and form little networks that help you do stuff that you do every day. So I'm interested in how neurons communicate. So I said the word excitatory. So we think about sort of two key ways that cells communicate, which is either excitatory, which just means that more signals from those types of neurons increase activity of the brain. And another type is called inhibitory, which just means that it decreases activity of the brain. So if you think about this, if you're listening to music, it's sort of like some of these neurons turn the volume up and some of these neurons turn the volume down. So what that means is that if, one neuron is sending a signal, so we'll call this sort of light pulse since it's an electrical activity. If one neuron sends a signal to another neuron, that initially might look sort of like this. If each of these lines is one signal, it's, think of Morse code or something, there's sort of a pulse sequence of messages. And this particular sequence might mean something for this neuron that's receiving all of those messages. But the brain is also full of a bunch of things called neuromodulators. What is that? It's sort of a whole bunch of chemicals that are in the brain, but instead of being everywhere like the excitatory and the inhibitory, they're just in a couple key places and then send out their long routes to communicate to various parts of the brain to adjust the activity of that increase and decrease. So it's sort of like adding color to this image, or talking about a whole bunch of the other, if we're using music as an analogy, there's all different things that contribute to your experience of music, right? It's not just volume up or volume down. It's also the tone, the melody, what the rhythm is like, the dynamics, loud and soft. So if you're thinking about modulators as these sort of elements of music, they're adjusting not just the volume, but all of these other aspects of the sounds that you're hearing in a song that you really like. So that might mean that, if we use the same two neurons and we're sending a signal, if there's a change in some of these modulators, the exact same sequence of pulses might end up being a very different message for the secondary neuron, because some of them might be longer, some of them might be louder, some of them might be softer or have a slightly different tone. So that's what I study in these two parts of the brain. So the visual cortex, again, is that area in the back of your brain, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front here. And so what I am interested in understanding is some of these questions. So how does the same nerve cell, those neurons we were just talking about, respond to signals when there are different levels of modulators, right? So how do those chemicals change the way that pulse sequence looks? And how do changes in one or more of these affect the way that a whole brain area functions? So if we look at one cell communicate with another cell, what happens there? But then also if we look at a whole brain area, what happens to you looking at a particular visual image if we change these things? Does it change the way that you see something? And then thirdly, how can we understand these changes well enough to help patients with brain disorders? And so this is the key place, well, all of these places, but math is really heavily involved in a lot of this stuff. So there are whole labs of neuroscientists that just do math. And the way they do that is by either doing statistics, which is, analyzing changes that we might observe in the brain, or that, we're using different types of sort of biological tests. Then we can use statistics to figure out if or if not there are any differences in what we've seen or what we've detected. There are also whole labs that use math to model and predict what might happen if there's changes. So it can be very expensive, and we're not allowed to do a lot of, for very good reasons, we're not allowed to do a lot of manipulating experiments on human beings. So we can take some of the things we learned, let's say from, looking at two different cells and the way those communicate, and then use math to say, okay, what might this mean about how these things might change the way that a whole brain area would respond differently to these changes, or the whole brain itself, which gets into some of the key questions that link these two things, which is what might be happening in patients with various brain disorders. And we can use math to kind of predict what those changes might mean at a cellular level or at a whole regional level, and how we might be able to adjust those things to better patients' lives. So Thank you for listening. That's what I study.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galvin. I really found that interesting. I don't have that much background knowledge about, like neuroscience and everything, so I found that incredible.
Oh,
I
good.
also
I'm
actually
glad.
have a friend. I have a friend in the Zoom. He was telling me that his favorite things are math and neuroscience, and this is perfectly like combined for him. So he thought that was. And so now we have a couple of questions from both the MIG team and the chat. So would you mind if I asked you a few?
Absolutely.
Great. So our first question is about your journey in STEM. So like, where did your passion come from? Was it from a small age, or did you just discover it in high school or college?
Great question. So I think I was always curious, which I think all kids are. I was probably one of those kids you would classify as a why kid, that I kept irritating my parents by asking why, but then with that answer, but then why? And would keep asking. And so they put me in a lot of science summer camps. So I've just been doing science for a lot of my life, as well as, art and reading and lots of other really fun things that you can learn about. But I think I enjoyed science a lot. And then when I went to college, I actually thought I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I spent a lot of time I grew up in Seattle, so I was a teen volunteer at the Seattle Aquarium all through high school, and just really thought that, sea otters were my passion and I should study them for my whole life, which I'm still a little sad I'm not doing. But when I went to college, I actually had to take a philosophy class. And so neuroscience ended up being this really interesting middle ground for me, where I really loved philosophy and thinking about what it means to think, and what it means to be who we are, and what the responsibilities of having that are, or how do we measure those things. While I really enjoyed philosophy classes, I knew that I needed to sort of touch things. I couldn't just sit and think about stuff. I would get a little stir crazy. So neuroscience ended up being this really cool middle ground of wanting to study behavior, which was sort of my interest in marine mammals, studying animals and their behavior and why they do certain things and what that means. And then the philosophy aspect, which is sort of applying it to humans. So I did not know until midway through college that I wanted to study neuroscience.
Yeah, that's great. I asked this question because a lot of students I know now, they're in middle school and they're worrying about their career path for the next 10 years. And they think it's something they have to absolutely be sure of right now. And so I think this is also a great thing for other students to kind of see and say, well, I don't necessarily know. I have to know my entire career when I'm 10 years old. So I hope everyone can listen to that too. Yeah.
Very true.
We also have a question from the chat that was personalized to you. It's asking, can you ask her if it's true that smart people have more brain wrinkles?
That's a great question. So I guess the thing to answer that question, I can kind of explain what those wrinkles are. So we know that basically what the wrinkling of the brain does is allow for more cells to be packed in the same space. So it means that, like, if I take a piece of paper, like this, when it's flat, it's taking up a whole lot of space. But if I crumble this paper, I won't do it because it's loud. But if I crumble that paper into a ball, it'll get really, really tiny. And it's because there's all those folds and wrinkles. So that is what has allowed our brain to develop without giving us these super enormous melon heads that we wouldn't be able to carry around. So the wrinkles are super important. That being said, there isn't a correlation between size of the brain, or you could argue number of cells, which might also be the same thing as increasing fold number. There's not a correlation between that and intelligence. So
I see. Thank you for breaking down these myths for us. Science. So I really enjoyed your speech. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the questions. So if anybody wants to reach out, you can always email questions to Math Invite for Girls, and we'll go ahead and send it over to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, thank you so much, Dr. Galvin, for talking to us today.
Thank you all for having me.
And so now I will pass it off to Ira. Ira, you can go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Pragya Sur. Dr. Pragya Sur is an assistant professor at Harvard University in the field of statistics. She's done a lot of research and writing on machine learning and the implications of machine learning with statistics. So Please help me in welcoming Dr. Pragya Sur.
Thank you so much for the invitation to speak here today. I thought that I'll start off by describing my journey to how I ended up where I am today a little bit, but I wish to give you a disclaimer at the very beginning. You may or may not find something interesting to learn from someone else's journey, but either way, your journey is going to be different from mine and is going to be unique in itself. So you should cherish your journey. So I was born in India, and I have been very lucky to have parents who were in STEM fields. Whether or not they pursued it as a profession, they at least were educated in STEM fields, so they knew what STEM fields are about. But more so, neither of my parents in their belief sign up to any of the stereotypes commonly present in various parts of the Indian society, or at least the part of India I am from, regarding what girls can do or cannot. So that they didn't sign up to those beliefs really helped me. My mom is a chemist herself, but she always has been an advocate for mathematics. So she believed, and she still believes, that mathematics is a fundamental subject that you really need to learn to survive in your daily life. To emphasize this point, one of the things she would do is the following. When we were young, whenever she would buy something, anything, she would ask us to sum the prices to tally with the receipts, because potentially, you know, that somebody can add like an extra item which you didn't really buy, and etc. But the crucial thing was she did not really care how many items there were on that receipt. So it could be as many as 20 or whatever, and she would just throw the numbers at us. It was me and my sister, and she would go very fast in throwing the numbers. It's like, I bought this, 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 and then she'd be like, okay, so what's the sum? And both my sister and mother were actually very good at summing numbers. They still are, and are much better at it than me. So I was trying very hard, and in the end, sometimes a bit embarrassed about being the slow kid in the family. So this was just one of the examples through which you would try to teach that, you know, math is like, you need it to survive. But to get the point across, I basically grew up in this environment where, you know, math was something you just absolutely needed to learn, and learn quite well, essentially to not receive a scolding at home. So that's how I looked at it when I was young. But one outcome was I learned my math, but I didn't really enjoy it as much when I was quite young, because it was like, oh, it's something you learn to like avoid the scolding, essentially. But what I really wanted to be was a doctor. My father is a physician, and he's basically, he's an oncologist, that is a cancer specialist. So he's like trying to save lives every day. So, you know, I thought, and I still think, that's a very noble profession. So I really just wanted to be a doctor, and I didn't want to do much mathematics once I grew up. But what happened was, as I entered high school, we graduated from numbers to geometry, algebra, calculus, combinatorics, and suddenly I found that I loved all of that, and math started becoming fun, like a lot of fun. But this presented quite a challenge for me, because before that I was dreaming about being a doctor, but now I really love math. And another thing that happened was I started realizing that I was not as good at biology, unfortunately. It really crushed my heart. But just that I couldn't remember several things the subject required me to remember. And so this was confusing. It was like a phase of confusion, but I started thinking, what can I do with my love of mathematics that potentially in some way can also be useful to the society, because that's where wanting to be a doctor was coming from. And I was very lucky, because this is an interesting phase. I'm like in middle high school, about your age, and I'm super confused what to do with my life. But I was lucky in that at that time, my father was going to a few medical conferences. So these are conferences where they're basically trying to figure out what is the most advanced treatment of cancer that has been discovered. Is it effective? Is it safe, etc.? And like people are presenting research at these conferences. But coincidentally and luckily, he met biostatisticians at these conferences. So statistics is a discipline that's concerned with developing methods for gleaning meaningful conclusions from data sets that you observe in real life. So the discipline itself is thus a fundamental tool for understanding how various scientific processes work. And biostatisticians are researchers who are trying to glean such information from typically medical data sets or biological data sets and provide meaningful conclusions. So what are the kinds of conclusions they are after? They are after answering questions like this: which genes are important for a particular disease? Do environmental factors interact with genetic factors in complex diseases like diabetes, etc.? So biostatisticians are basically trying to understand these questions all the time. I was lucky because I had no idea at that time what statistics is about. I had never even heard about the subject. But my father kind of exposed me to this discipline by describing like, you know what, there is something like this that exists in the world. And when I heard this, when I heard what biostatisticians do in their everyday profession, I felt like, oh, perfect. That's exactly what I want to do with my love of mathematics. Okay, so that's basically how I got into statistics. And, then there are sort of good undergraduate master's programs in India, which specialize students in statistics. So I applied for one of that and got into it. That was a good thing, the special experience, and that's how everything started. All right, so I want to tell you a bit next about what I do in my everyday life as a researcher. So I'm very interested in developing methods for understanding how large-scale data sets can provide us meaningful information about any and every scientific process. So I told you about biostatisticians a bit. Often they are concerned with medical or biological data sets. As a statistician, I might be interested in those kinds of data sets, but I might be interested in data sets coming from earth sciences or other disciplines as well. But these data sets are really large. So to give you an idea how large they could be, maybe you have collected data on 20,000 human beings, and maybe you're interested in studying the genetic factors that influences a disease, for example, breast cancer, Crohn's disease, or it could be other things, other diseases. But these days we have technology to collect data about all your genes almost. So maybe the data set I'm talking about has a large number of variables. And when I say large here, I mean on the scale of a few millions. So in your head, think of a system of equations where you have 20,000 equations and overall you have 1 million variables. That's the scale at which we're talking here. So to learn patterns about the underlying scientific process from such humongous data sets actually requires a lot of mathematics. And that's what statistics is all about. So in fact, the foundations of statistics involves a lot of beautiful math. And what you get out of applying all that math is a concrete understanding of whatever information the data can provide about the scientific process under consideration. So this task is simultaneously challenging, and I find it very, very interesting. And that's what I do in my everyday life. And I rather enjoy doing that. And I find that statistics is this beautiful subject where you get to do a lot of the challenging math with potential real life applications. Now, I want to say, so I told you part of the story why I entered statistics, but there is another part which I did not tell you. And this might tie to the discussion we were having a little bit before. That is, it really helped me in my journey that I spent a lot of time towards the end of my high school trying to figure out what I wanted to pick up as a profession. And hearing that biostat story, who are biostatisticians, somehow that had resonated with me, and that really resonated with me, and that made me choose this discipline. But another reason I entered this discipline is because in the Indian education system, if you enter college to learn, let's say, physics, then you almost cannot change your discipline later in life. So, and that's just how is it. If you enter college to learn chemistry, you're just like stuck with being a chemist for the rest of your life. And somehow that idea really scared me. And part of me was like, oh, I want to do something useful. I like mathematics, but I actually like other things too. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And I felt that, you know what it sounds like? Statistics is the subject which has a lot of applications, and you need to do good math for that. And maybe this is a subject, and now I'm quoting a famous quote, that helps you play in everyone's backyard. So basically, you can do a lot of interesting math, and then maybe you can try to solve problems in neuroscience or in art sciences, planetary sciences, in social sciences. And so the fact that the subject provided the flexibility to migrate to other disciplines later in life was also one of my reasons for choosing it. So the story is a bit mixed in the sense that I felt this is the best way I can use my love of mathematics, but at the same time, I was confused. So if you folks are confused about what you want to do with your life, or like what profession you would like picking, I just want to say, like, I feel it's completely fine. And I'm sure like you'll find something which you really like to do even as you go along. And I feel it's completely fine to not have that figured out right now at a relatively early stage. But one thing that I would encourage you to do, and this is something I was encouraged a lot, which helped me, is, if you find something that you like, and if, that's resonating with you and that's your passion, even if you face like resistance from folks around you, or even if you don't know anyone around you who has done that before, it's probably something you should try. It also, if you like doing something, you'll potentially be better at it than other things too. And then eventually it's going to be fun and you'll have a lot of, you'll enjoy your everyday professional life, 10 years down the line. Okay. So maybe I'll stop with that and I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. I really enjoyed your speech. That was super interesting. So I'm going to ask you a question that we prepared,
Sure.
which was, do you find that statistics is a male-dominated field? And if so, do you ever feel any social biases or any differences in your career path and maybe a male colleague's career path based on the way people perceive you?
That's a very interesting question. So first, I should clarify that statistics is a very broad discipline. I would say at this point, I am in the more theoretical part of statistics. And over the years, I have found that that is rather male dominated. I would say it's less male dominated in the United States than it was back in India. But because it's such a broad subject and there are other, methods and applications parts of statistics where there are fantastic women and they have always inspired me. My answer would be yes. In the part of statistics I'm in, I do find that that's male dominated, but I would also say that it hasn't shown up. I wouldn't say it has shown up as social biases as much because I've always tried to find mentors who have kind of supported me through the whole thing. And often these mentors have been male senior colleagues and they've been very nice and open and very encouraging. So the answer is yes, but it's not like I found specific social biases out of that. It's the biases I faced are more the biases I faced, generally from the Indian society about being a woman, like professional woman.
Thank you for your response. That was super good. So I wanted to ask you, what is one piece of advice you would give to any female students aspiring to become a leader or aspiring to do research in your field? What would you say to them or what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, this also ties to my previous answer partially. That is, find good mentors, people who believe in your abilities, who are capable of giving you maybe the right advice at the right time, and who at the same time help you grow both as a professional, both as a professional and as an overall good human being. So find people who can do this for you, and I would say keep them as mentors for the rest of your life because those mentors can be your current school teachers. But they may have a lot of wisdom to offer later in your life as well, when you're in college or even later. So yeah, just find good mentors.
All right, thank you so much for your answers. I think we're out of time for now for questions, but we really enjoyed having you. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. Next, I'm going to pass it on to Ava to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. Lastly, we have Professor Liza Levina. She's the professor of statistics at the University of Michigan and works in the application of statistics through research in neuroimaging and data science. We're honored to have her here today to speak with us. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Levina.
Hi, thank you for the introduction and for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I can see now that the design was a neuroscientist and a statistician, and they covered a lot of ground. So I will see if I find things to add because I'm a statistician who works on neuroscience applications. I want to start from saying that I'm professor of statistics here at the University of Michigan. I have 3 kids who are similar to you guys in age. This year they were in 10th and 6th and 4th grades. So I have some idea of how it is being in middle school. I have to say that the pressure on career choices and grades and all these things that you guys are facing is nothing I could have imagined at your age. So ignore it as much as you can. That's all I can say. It's really tough. I know it is. Pragya did a great job advertising statistics, but I think I'll say a little bit more about this. I'll start with what I do, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here. In the first encounter in my kids' experience with statistics in elementary school as when you ask questions of your classmates and then you make these nice data summaries of people's favorite colors and number of siblings, and you learn to compute the mean and the median, and it's kind of cute. But I think it's terrible that a lot of people go through their K through 12 education thinking that's what statistics is and that's all it is. And it's really a whole lot more than data summaries. It is really about the mathematics of uncertainty and mathematics of understanding chance and quantifying chance, and also about separating signal from noise. So that's a really interesting part of mathematics, if you think of it as mathematics. But it's also about working with real applications, as you heard. And that was one of the things that motivated me to choose statistics, is I really also wanted to do something that connects to the real world. And one of the beauties of this discipline, which many people don't know about, even in college so well, it's just something that maybe they take an intro class in and they don't really know what it does. But one of the beautiful things about it is that you can do a lot of math there. You can do very theoretical things. You can do a lot of coding if that's what you like. You can do a lot of applied work talking to scientists, maybe neuroscientists, or lots of other people. There is really lots of room for different preferences and different strengths. So what I do myself, I also work on statistics of large data sets, especially statistics of networks. And networks is when we have data, not just on variables about, let's say, an individual person, but also in their connections to each other. So if you go back to that first grade little statistics thing where everybody reports their favorite color and their number of siblings, imagine you also record who's friends with her. Maybe you ask them, or maybe their teacher knows. So that part of the data of who's friends is called network data. And that changes everything, because now everything is connected. And as you can imagine, it matters, right? If I told you about a kid in that class, that first grader, and you didn't know their favorite color and you wanted to predict it, but I also told you that out of their 5 friends, 4 friends' favorite color is pink, you might have a better chance of guessing that kid's favorite color, right? Than if I told you nothing about their friends. So that's the kind of thing we try to do. We try to put these sources of information together, and you can imagine it has really serious consequences in more serious applications, like epidemics spreading through human networks, or say in high school, risk-taking behaviors, right? Whether, say, your friends smoke has a lot to do with whether you're likely to pick up smoking, and things like that. I also work on applications to neuroscience, especially neuroimaging. And Veronica gave you a great introduction to the brain, but I just think of it as a network, right? There are these parts of the brain connected by those cords, and they communicate with each other. And that's just like a network that I study. And we have technology now in the modern world that allows you to record these connections. And then we can look at these networks to better understand the mechanisms behind various diseases, various mental health issues, also development and aging, how the brain changes. I also think the brain is extremely interesting, and it's also an extremely hard problem, because guess what? Everybody's brain is very different from everybody else's brain. Brains are very unique. The data is very large and it's very noisy. And the signal to noise ratio in brain imaging is one of the worst I've ever seen in my experience in applied statistics. But the questions are so interesting that I really love working on those applications. So that's what I do. I also teach students and I advise students. And I'm a department chair now, so I do a lot of administrative work, which to me just means helping people. And I really like that part. I think that's an important part to not forget about any kind of, research or not research industry, STEM career that you have. There are always humans involved, and those relationships are important. How I got here, there's definitely no plan. If you'd asked me in middle school, I wouldn't have predicted a single thing about myself now at all. I wouldn't have known the word statistics. I also, like Pragya, grew up in a family where my parents were both scientists. I have one older brother. He was a physicist, so it was very normal for both men and women. And I was never scolded. I was a late adored child, so I could never do any wrong. But it was just something that people did. And nobody ever said that girls are worse at it than boys. It was just not part of the landscape. I'm from Russia. I was born in St. Petersburg, and Russia is in many ways a very sexist place. I'm not saying it's not a sexist place, it is. But just that particular part in the environment that I grew up did not come up. And to be honest with you, I don't think I really thought about this issue of women in STEM until I was probably a faculty member. And I know it's, of course, you guys are thinking about it and it's different here, but what I would say is if you can, save yourself some brain space by thinking less about that rather than more. It is there. Decide once and for all that, yes, you belong in STEM. Yes, you can absolutely do it. And don't spend too much time thinking about, well, which is that guy sitting next to me? Is he thinking I don't belong here? First of all, who cares? And second, if he does, that's his problem, not yours. Right? So it helped me so much not to have that weight over me. And I think and I know it's easier said than done sometimes, but if you can put that aside sometimes, I think that could be really helpful. And then, so I went to what would be called here a magnet school for math, not because I loved it so much, but it was something I found easy. One of the greatest things about that was that I was surrounded with by kids who, liked similar things and were similar to me. I think finding an environment like that is very important. It may not be a magnet school, but it may be like just this math invitational competition or a club after school or anything like that. But finding people who like the same things as you, I think is really important. I was never good at math competitions, by the way. I totally sucked at them, just so you know. And then I studied math as an undergraduate. It was also not what I wanted to do in high school. In high school, I wanted to be a linguist, but I didn't become a linguist. I studied math. And then I discovered statistics more or less by chance. And that was my motivation, was really taking math that I knew I could do and applying it to something that matters in the real world, which is, I think, how a lot of people with math training end up in stats. I see Pragya nodding. And it really turned out to be everything that it was promised to be. And I really love it, doing this, taking the skills that I developed when I was young and applying it to things that hopefully matter. So I think I'll stop here and I'll see if there are questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Levina. I really enjoyed your speech and I found it incredibly inspirational. I have a few questions from the MIG team and one from the chat. It says, it was asking if the 6 degrees of separation is related to, if it's related to, oh my gosh, statistics, I'm sorry, and how it's related.
That's a great question. It's related to networks. It's certainly a network science problem, and we can study it with statistics. We can, study what is a typical degree of separation, what is a typical distribution of degrees of separation. Not every single one of us will have exactly 6 degrees of separation from every other human being on the planet. But there is some truth to this number 6. It was established in not the most scientific manner. We had, Google that story. It's a fun story of the experiment that they did. But the small world phenomenon of, things sort of short circuiting through the networks and really finding connections, that's really there. People find it in lots and lots of social networks. And it usually goes through hubs. So it's not like everybody's equally connected to everyone else. There are people, in the current less exciting context, we call them super spreaders. There are people who are central to connecting a whole lot of people. So yes, it is related to statistics in that way.
Thank you. And we have one more composed by the MIG team. We asked the other speakers this question, and we were just wondering, what is one piece of advice you would give female students aspiring to become leaders in STEM?
So I feel like I think I maybe already said that as the one most important thing. Just don't spend your time looking over your shoulder. One of these things. I also would second what Pragya said is find mentors. I was lucky to have wonderful mentors, but I also didn't always follow their advice. It's important to listen to them, but in the end, you do what feels true to you. And find something that you enjoy. There's no point trying very hard to do something you don't even like because your parents want you to or whatever. But once you do, it just becomes easier. And take, of course there's bias. Absolutely, there is gender bias, but there are also so many opportunities for middle school girls, and then all the way through, there are many opportunities you can take advantage of for women to develop careers in STEM and do that. Don't be shy about it, and just don't think too hard about it. If that's what you want to do, just go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very inspirational. I really appreciate that. And then one more question by the MIG team, specifically regarding statistics and neuroimaging. What is the biggest impact that you believe statistics and data science has had on the world?
Oh, that's a big question. And you can see how data science just over the last decade or so has really transformed how we live and has really transformed society, the use of data and everything. And I think that impact that statistics and data science have had on society was slightly unintentional. I think a lot of us are just coming to terms with the effects that our field has had on society as a whole, and how it is used, and what conclusions people draw and what actions they take based on statistics. And I think that's something we need to be aware of and keep our eyes open to. It's not just, we have to now think not just about developing good algorithms or proving theorems, establishing their properties, but also about how these algorithms are used and what comes out of it. And that is something we never really thought about as a field very much before, and we don't quite know how to think about it. It's not so much an issue in neuroimaging. I'm thinking now more of social science applications and big tech, use of data, those things. But we have to start thinking about it because it's related to what we do. And specifically in neuroimaging, maybe Veronica knows what the biggest impact of statistics was. I don't know that whole field, but what I really hope, and I think we're going there, I don't think we're there yet, but what I really hope is that eventually the impact of statistics will be not just to say, well, this group of people who have, let's say, ADHD is different from this group of people over here who don't, but understand how and why they're different and what can be done to help them. It's machine learning has gotten extremely good at prediction and sort of discrimination. So if I show a machine learning algorithm to groups of people with and without a certain condition, it'll get very good at distinguishing between them, explaining why they're different and how, and most importantly, how it can be changed to help the people who need help. That's a much, much harder problem, and we're not that good at it yet. So I think that's where in the future, the impact will be coming from, is really putting those amazing predictive tools that we now have to work to actually change things.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Levina. Again, we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. I truly enjoyed it. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Amanda.
Thank you, Ava. Again, thank you so much to all of our amazing speakers. I really agree with the parts where you guys talked about how, like Professor Levina said, maybe don't pay as much attention to it or take that as discouragement from other people. If you want to go into statistics, you want to go into neuroscience, go ahead and do that. Fill yourself with people around you who are also encouraging about that. not people who are, bringing you down and stuff. But also, I think also a good mentor is also absolutely key for encouragement, for opportunities, for emotional support too. I know a lot of the times people become discouraged after a few setbacks or a few failures, but a mentor like that is really, really crucial. But of course, that's also not easier said than done. So again, thank you so much to you guys again for taking your time out of your schedule to talk to us. I know I enjoyed it. I've had a lot of people message me and say that they particularly enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And so now we're going to be transitioning to the award ceremony for those who just took the 2021 online test. So this year we had a lot of people compete, and surprisingly, a lot of 4th and 5th graders competed in the 6th grade category. So I want to say I applaud your ambition, your bravery and everything, and your dedication, especially to doing all of these problems. I even saw a 2nd grader actually attempt this test, and I think that is wonderful. Even if you don't get them right and you don't win, it's amazing, I think. So without further ado, our 6th grade winners did an absolutely great job. We can go ahead, Ira, if you would reveal them. So in 6th place.
Give me 1 second. Having a little bit of technical difficulty.
I also will say, we do a couple of even like international students. There was a student who joined us from Egypt and a student who joined us from India. So again, I'm really excited to see everyone just think of mathematics as something that's truly enjoyable, doing these problems not because you're getting a grade or testing in school and this is your final exam, you have so much pressure. I think it really is enjoyable and fun. And again, we will release these tests, or sorry, these practice problems. Or sorry, not practice problems. Our previous tests are all on our website. So if you enjoyed the problems, you can go ahead and look on our website. You can practice some more if you'd like. But without further ado, I think Ira has put up on there our 6th grade winners. We have Catherine from California, Valerie from California, Charlotte from Tennessee, Jackie from New York, Eva from California, and finally Paige from New Jersey. Congratulations to all of you guys. We had to do a couple of tiebreakers because a lot of people actually scored the same. So congratulations to those. And I will pass it off to Ira for our 7th graders.
Thank you so much. I just want to say to all the 7th graders out there, 7th grade is an awkward time in middle school, but good for you for paying attention to school, doing your math competitions. I know it can feel intimidating being around people who are older, who, may be better at math than you, or who you may feel may be better at math than you. So sincerely, good job to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and present our winners. In 6th place, we have Cynthia from California. In 5th, we have Rika from California. In 4th, Anna from California. In 3rd, Christina from Washington. 2nd, Charlotte from New Jersey. And 1st, Angela from Illinois. So good job to all of you. It looks like we have a lot of Californians doing super well. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Ava for our 8th grade winners.
Thank you, Ira. I'm so proud of everyone who competed because you all did super amazing. So our top winners for 8th grade were.
Give me 1 second, Ava.
Okay.
Okay, there we
go. Okay, so in 6th place, we have Annie from Tennessee, Sophia from Washington, Ashley from California, and Melissa from California, May from California, Audrey from Texas, and finally in 1st place, we have Jessie from Texas. I'm so proud of all of y'all. Congratulations. You all really exceeded my expectations. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Amanda for our closing remarks.
All right, guys, again, those who won 1st place, a lot of them actually only got one question wrong. And again, you can look at our website for the test posted on there, but that is incredible, guys. Just these 25 questions, they were meant to kind of mock the AMC 8, which is a really great competition for math as well. It's nationally established and has a lot of history to that. So again, congratulations to all of you guys. And so finally with that, I want to say that again, for those who have already showed all of this dedication and ambition to mathematics through, even if it's just practicing math by yourself or even participating in competitions like these, I think your dedication and your ambition is absolutely amazing. And I hope that every single one of you guys continues to do this in the future and to not lose any, and be encouraged essentially to keep pursuing whatever you want to do, even if it's a completely different direction of what you thought it was originally. So again, thank you so much to all of our amazing speakers. I really enjoyed every single one of you guys' speeches. And also to our generous sponsor, Connection Tutoring Center based in Memphis, Tennessee. And finally, a big thank you to everyone who attended our seminar and our competition. So with that being said, that is all we have for today. So hopefully I will get to see everyone next time or next year whenever we have our next competition. All right, thank you so much, guys. Bye. If you have a question, by the way, you can send it to our email, which I will put in the chat. So it's mathinviteforgirls@gmail.com. So if you need to contact us in any way, again, we will have everything on our website. Give us maybe tonight to put it up there. And again, thank you so much. So I'll see you guys later.